It became known as Wisconsin's own Amityville Horror, a bizarre haunting that shocked the town and captured the attention of the world. It involves the very normal church-going Tallman family in a secondhand bunk bed the family purchased for their children. A bunk bed! You heard me right. Let's start from the beginning. This case took place in Horicon, Wisconsin, which is a small Midwestern farming town. A safe and quiet place to raise a family. It was a life the Tallman family was drawn to when they moved into their house there in 1986. Alan and Debbie Tallman and their kids found a new place to call home. The home was a one-floor, smaller ranch-style house, a place you would never think would be the setting for what came next. And when purchasing the place, the Tallmans figured this was a spot they would be in for years to come. So they decided to start buying pieces of furniture for the family home and fixing up the house as they saw fit. You know, making the place their own. That next year, as the kids were growing, Alan and Debbie decided to head out to a secondhand furniture shop. There, they came upon a used bunk bed that they thought would be great for the new house. They were in awe, as it looked almost brand new, and they thought, hey, this would be perfect for their younger kids. They purchased it, brought it home, and assembled it in the basement, where the family stored it for a few months until one day, they moved the bunk beds upstairs. This was a decision that the family would come to regret. Big time. This decision led to 9 months of terror for the Tallmans. Almost instantly, strange things began happening in the home. The very first night the bunk beds were moved upstairs, one of the Tallmans' children, named Danny, went to sleep in his room next door to the room the family put the bunk beds in. After falling asleep, an old clock radio in Danny's room came alive. It turned on and started switching stations on its own. Danny jumped up, scared, and ran into his parents' bedroom. He frantically told his parents that the radio had turned on all by itself. And not just that, he said that he saw the dial was moving on its own, as if someone or something invisible was in the room with him, moving it. The parents didn't really believe this and just ended up taking the radio out of the room and chalked this up to Danny having a wild imagination. But then, something else. Within weeks, all the Tallmans' children, who rarely fell ill, began getting really sick. Debbie said there were some weeks when all of the kids would all be at the doctor's office at the same time. She had no idea what was going on, but this was unlike anything they had experienced. She said the kids never really got sick before this. A few weeks later, Alan himself had an experience. He was in the basement near where the family had stored the bunk beds prior to moving them upstairs. And down there he was painting the walls, trying to fix it up a bit. When he decided to take a break, go upstairs and get something to eat. As he left, he placed his paintbrush on the table. When he came back down to the basement about 30 minutes later, he saw the brush had been moved. He found it had been dropped handle first into the bucket of paint. There was no one else in the basement with Alan, so he didn't really know what to think about this. A few nights later, the Tallman's daughter began sleeping in the bunk beds, and almost instantly began telling her parents that she was scared to sleep there because she was seeing things in the room. She told her mom, Debbie, that she saw an old witch-looking woman that would stand behind the door and watch her at night. She said the woman had long black hair and glowed like fire. A few weeks later, one of the Tallmans' other children, who didn't know anything about what his little sister had seen, told his parents that he woke up in the middle of the night to see an old woman, a witch-looking lady, standing by his door, and said she glowed like fire. All over the house, strange things were happening. Doors banged open and shut on their own, a chair rocked by itself. Disembodied voices called out to the family from empty rooms. At this point, the family was starting to believe that their house was haunted. So they decided to bring in their pastor, Reverend Wayne Dobratz. After a walkthrough, he said he felt the presence of evil in the home, the devil. He believed the activity was demonic. The Reverend blessed the home, and the family hoped that this would help. But the activity continued, and it really seemed to center around the children. They were seeing apparitions, hearing voices calling out to them, and seeing that old witch. They soon became so scared that they no longer wanted to stay in the house at all. So there was really no peace within the home. Frustrated, one day, Alan began pacing around the house, shouting at the top of his lungs. He had hit his limit. He screamed, "Pick on me, leave my kids alone, show yourself. If you want to fight someone, fight me." Hoo boy. Whatever entity was inhabiting the house and terrorizing the family seemed to accept the challenge. Just a few weeks later, Alan arrived back home around 2 a.m. after working the late shift. As he made his way inside, he heard a strange howling sound coming from the garage. He went to go investigate and said it was then he heard a voice coming from behind the house saying, "Come here." Alan walked around, couldn't see anything, so as he turned to walk back towards the front of the house, he heard that same voice saying again, "Come here, come here." He then looked up to see red flames shooting inside the garage. He said the flames had a glow with red eyes. After this, Alan was in distress and began sleeping on the floor of his daughter's room. The kids were terrified at that point and felt better with their dad in the room. One night, as Alan was on the ground about to fall asleep, he said a fog rose up from the floor, formed the shape of flames with green eyes peering at him. A voice then emerged saying, "You're dead." And then it was gone. This really shook Alan, and from then on, just like his kids, he was terrified of whatever entity was in the home. A few days later, a relative of the family spent the evening at the house, helping Debbie with the children while Alan worked late. Now, this relative was a skeptic of the paranormal. He really didn't believe in it. So when they said the house was haunted, he didn't care. He thought, I'll be fine. But he wasn't. But on this evening, this relative became a believer when that night, he saw a horrific figure materialize in the bedroom as he was putting the kids to sleep. And that was it. After 9 long months of torment, the Tallman family fled their home that night in the dead of a Wisconsin winter. They had finally had enough. 2 weeks after the Tallmans left their home, they had the bunk bed destroyed. But news spread all over town, and everyone was talking about the haunting. Media quickly descended on the otherwise sleepy and quiet neighborhood, along with hordes of curious thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. Rumors of ghosts had swept through the crowd at a Friday night basketball game at the local high school, and hundreds of cars began pouring down Larrabee Street past the Tallman home. People were walking through the yards of all the other homes on the block, climbing over fences, peering into windows of the home. Many saying, well, they're not afraid of ghosts, so they tried to open the doors and windows of the Tallman home and were intent on getting inside to prove how unafraid they really were. When the police got there and ordered the looky-loos to get away from the house, a few wannabe Ghostbusters put up a fight, and arrests for disorderly conduct were made, and in the end, the street was barricaded for a while. It got out of control. Partially because this was a small town, so hey, this was kind of exciting news and it spread fast. But also because of how strange the whole story was. What do you mean this family has a haunted bunk bed? Come on. The Tallman's haunting became a spectacle, and the house became known as Wisconsin's very own Amityville, a place of pure evil. Reverend Dobratz returned to the home after the Tallmans moved out in hopes of inciting whatever evil had taken up residence there. And the town's police chief, Doug Glayman, didn't think the house was haunted, but after speaking with the family, he was convinced that they truly experienced the things that they claimed, and saw that the Tallmans didn't want notoriety, they didn't want their faces in the public eye. They were just scared. This police chief was a skeptic though, so he and 2 other officers scoured the house looking for evidence of a prank, hidden recorders or projectors, but they found nothing, and also couldn't find any way the family was or wanted to benefit from such an ordeal. In the end, the Tallmans went on to move to another city and said they didn't experience anything paranormal ever again. So, this haunting is beyond insane. Am I right? What's really strange about this story is that everything changed for the family when they brought in this bunk bed. They didn't report any activity within the home before that, which gets into the realm of haunted items. When you purchase something at a secondhand store, it's true, you have no idea who owned it before you, or what happened near or on the item. But when I hear this story, I really wonder if it was just a bunk bed, or if there was something already in the house when they moved in, but the activity became amplified. The Tallmans were doing work to the home, changing things around, painting, moving furniture. It just makes me wonder. But what do you think? Do you believe this entity was attached to the bunk bed as the family believes, or to the house itself? Or some sort of a supernatural combination? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your take on this case. Haunted bunk beds? Just when you thought you had seen and heard it all on this show, right?